Coming up on Tech News Today, Microsoft jumping back into the old risk computer game. Also, Google changes its search results for Europe. And Mozilla can make any site collaborative. But do we want that? All that and more coming up.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Monday, April 15th, 2013. Tech News Today is brought to you by Gazelle, the fast and simple way to sell your used gadgets. Find out what your used Samsung Galaxy, iPhone, and other smartphones are worth at Gazelle.com. And by Interop Las Vegas, the largest independent technology conference and expo for IT professionals. If you're in IT, you cannot miss this year's event. Visit www.interop.com to register and use code WELV for $200 off a conference pass or a free expo pass. And by Shutterstock.com. With over 20 million high-quality stock photos, illustrations, vectors, and video clips, Shutterstock helps you take your creative projects to the next level. For 30% off your new account, go to Shutterstock.com and use offer code TNT4. Welcome to Tech News Today. I'm Tom Merritt.
I'm Sarah Lane.
And I'm Jason Howell.
Ayaz Akhtar on a well-deserved vacation, but we're still here to give you the top 10 stories of the day in the news feed. Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, and New York Times all report Google has agreed to a settlement with the European Commission over antitrust allegations. Google will identify its own products in search results, and Google will also allow at least 3 competing results to be displayed next to its own in certain circumstances. Sites can restrict up to 10% of their data from Google's index in Europe, as well as exclude results from special Google searches, like travel searches, for instance, without excluding results from Google's main search. The agreement only applies to Europe.
Hey, guess who's working on a watch?
Me.
Besides you.
Me.
And you.
Oh.
And me. And our mothers. Microsoft. Yes, the company's working on designs for a touch-enabled smartwatch, reports the Wall Street Journal, citing sources that say Microsoft is gathering components for the prototype of what could potentially be a watch-style device. So what kind of components? Well, things like 1.5-inch displays from component makers for the prototype. Microsoft is not commenting, though.
Dish Network has put an offer on Sprint to counter SoftBank's offer, starting a little bitty more maybe for the U.S. number 3 carrier. Dish offered an informal $25.5 billion U.S. Dish is also bidding to purchase Clearwire, which is controlled by Sprint. Dish would have to make the bid formal to force a decision from Sprint shareholders.
After a hiring freeze, Foxconn has reportedly begun adding employees again at one of its Chinese factories in anticipation of Apple's next iPhone, says a person familiar with the plans to Bloomberg. The so-called iPhone 5S is widely believed to be that 2013 iPhone that will be available on June. Just kidding. I don't know the answer.
Nobody. But it's a big surprise.
No.
Rackspace wants to help large service providers become cloud providers, according to Director of Strategy Scott Sanchez. PC World reports Rackspace is offering to build OpenStack deployments for other hosting providers, like telecommunication companies, for instance. Additionally, Rackspace will make its OpenStack deployments interoperable, allowing customers to run their workloads in different locations around the globe.
Metro PCS has altered some terms for its proposed merger with Deutsche Telekom unit T-Mobile and has asked shareholders to vote on the deal. The move follows Deutsche Telekom upping its offer last week, in part from pressure from activists and proxy adversary firms. The new terms include reducing the combined company debt by $3.8 billion to $11.2 billion and lowering the interest rate on the debt by 50 basis points.
Facebook is trying its best to burnish its image as a violator of your privacy. Facebook has started an alliance with the attorneys general in 19 U.S. states to put out state-specific public service announcements starting this Tuesday. A safety video and a privacy tip sheet will also be distributed on Facebook's own safety page, as well as on the attorney general's Facebook pages and their own websites.
Back to some iPhone news. A group of Chinese iPhone distributors have been arrested for sending Apple fake components in order to get actual real replacement parts worth about the equivalent of $64,000 US. The 5 suspects were arrested this month after Apple reported to local police it had received the fake 4S components from a distributor in the Chinese city of Wenzhou, also charged with repairing iPhones.
Whatever you do, don't blink. Blink and you're possibly sued for trademark infringement if you're Google. Remember back on April 3rd when Google announced it would fork WebKit to create its own browser engine called Blink? Well, they may need a new name. I don't know. Turns out on April 9th, a mere 6 days later, Microsoft filed a trademark application with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office for the name Blink. Microsoft has a Windows Phone photo app called Blink. Perhaps it's just hearing the name used by Google that spurred them to like, you know what, we should really file a trademark on that.
Mobile service provider NQ Mobile has some bad news. Malware threats on mobile platforms grew 163% in 2012, more than 65,000 identified distinct forms of app repackaging and malicious URLs and SMS phishing. The attacks were mostly geared towards Android devices, which of course is the platform choice for almost 95% of threats identified by NQ.
This episode of Tech News Today brought to you by Gazelle. It's the easiest way to turn old gadgets into cash. Instead of having them filling up drawers and crates and closets, you could be sending them off through the mail in a box provided by Gazelle, and they will send you back money. I'm not kidding you. Do you want the new Samsung Galaxy S4? I know some of you do. Maybe you want to buy the HTC One or the iPhone 5. Before you upgrade, make sure you sell your used phone or gadget to Gazelle for cash money. Find out how much you can get today. The coolest thing about it is you go to gazelle.com, Gazelle.com. You just tell them the condition. They'll even buy broken iPads and iPhones. Get a risk-free offer, and then it's locked in for 30 days. So if you are buying a new phone, that gives you time to go buy the new phone. Put it on a credit card maybe or something. Then you can transfer all your data to the new phone. Then you take the old phone and you send it off to Gazelle. As soon as they get it, in a couple of days, they'll turn it around, pay you by PayPal or check. But lock it in today. It's risk-free. Not committed to anything, but you can get that price locked in, and you know that price is probably not going to go up over time. You know what? You may be needing a little money now that it's tax time, so why not take advantage of this? Go, if you'd like to get one of those new hot smartphones and you need a little cash, find out what your iPhone, your Samsung, your other Android smartphones are worth. Take a minute, go to Gazelle.com and find out. Sell your used Samsung Galaxy or iPhone today at Gazelle.com. And we thank them for their support of Tech News Today. Also, we want to thank Father Robert Balaser for joining us. He is the host of This Week in Enterprise Tech right here on the Twit Network and, of course, the techstop.net. Welcome back to the show, Father Robert. Great to have you, man.
Thank you for having me. I didn't think you'd be inviting me back after that horrible, horrible debacle all those episodes ago.
Right. I'd almost forgotten about that.
I forgot about that, too.
How did that? No, never mind.
Let's just not revisit.
Leave it best left forgotten.
Best left in the memory. I got it.
No, we're happy to have you here today. Of course, Aya's on vacation today and tomorrow, but we still got tech news to talk about. Let's start with this watch. Wall Street Journal reports it's an order for 1.5-inch displays that would be touch-enabled that they're hearing about from sources. And they don't know if Microsoft's going to bring it to market or not, but they're obviously doing a little bit of a prototype run. Samsung and Apple also working on these wrist devices. Gartner last year said that wearable smart electronics in things like shoes and tattoos will emerge as a $10 billion industry by 2016. We also have a story today about Apple board member Bill Campbell in an interview at an Intuit event saying there are a lot of things going on with the application of technology to really intimate things, called Google Glass a phenomenal breakthrough. Pretty much intimated that Apple's working on some kind of wearable device. Everybody thinks it's a wrist watch of some sort. So I want to ask you guys, let your imaginations off the leash a bit. Who do you think is the first to hit this market? Everybody's scrambling for it. And what is your ideal product in wearable computing, Sarah?
Well, I think, I wonder how many companies we've heard that are working on watches that information has been leaked out just so we know that they're working on a watch because there's been so much talk around Apple coming out with an iWatch.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know who's first, but we've seen this before. Sometimes the first product, just to say you're first, ends up being the half-baked one. So maybe Samsung's got the first watch, maybe it gets released next month. I don't know. Maybe this is something that Samsung was working on, and it's like, well, isn't that a coinky-dink? Apple was working on one too. Well, we're almost done with ours, and maybe that's not the case at all. I don't know.
Yeah, there's not really the best wearable technology. I think this is an extension of an old philosophy that we had in the CE area, and that was the multiple screens, the 3 screens. In order to be a major player, you needed to have 3 screens. Now, in the old day, that was you had the TV, you maybe had the desktop, and maybe you had a laptop. And if you could get the 3 screens, that guaranteed you a certain amount of market share. Now I think they've realized that the wearable glass, the phone, the tablet, and the watch, that's the new arena for the 3 screens. You need to capture 3 of those in order to be a major player in wearable technology. So there's not really an ideal 3rd screen, 4th screen that's for wearable tech. It's have enough that you can sort of shotgun effect into the lead. I think that's what we're seeing from Microsoft.
A wrist device is barely a screen, too, right? It's almost more of just a control surface. And I still don't get it personally. I don't get the yearn for having a smartwatch. And maybe it's I was burned by the Spot Watch back in the day by Microsoft when they tried it. This could be another instance where Microsoft was too early and ends up being too late. Who knows? But I'm still wondering what is it that attracts people, because I know they are. The Pebble Watch was huge, and in fact they just put out their SDK Friday, somebody in the chat room told me. So Sarah, I mean, is there something, or Father Robert, either one of you guys, is there something you know about the wristwatch that could convince me that I should want one?
Well, I think the first thing, I've mentioned this before, the first thing we have to stop doing is thinking of it as a watch. Yes, it will tell time. Lots of things have clocks on them now. You know, I got a watch right in front of me on my laptop. But it's probably the place on your body that you can have a computer that's the least annoying, right?
It's like a bracelet then.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I mean, an anklet, probably a little bit more annoying. I don't know. It's a little clunkier. You got, like bones you have to deal with. The eye ring, that's even been floated around. I mean, then you're just sort of getting silly. Like, I mean, what are you actually going to be able? You're going to have to scroll words and read sort of like this. So I think that the wrist is just, it's a very natural place for something that is controlling other devices to be. And that's why we're also focused on, it's a watch, because that's what we've called things like that in the past.
When Microsoft released the Spot Watch before they killed it in 2008, it really was designed to replace the wristwatch that everyone wore. Well, nobody wears wristwatches anymore, and that's why there's so many people who are down on any sort of smartwatch, be it from Apple, Microsoft, Samsung, whatever. But I think Sarah's absolutely right here, which is this is not a watch. It is a computer that you wear in the place where you used to wear a watch, if you ever wore a watch. Now, on a side note, it is kind of fun to think of the fact that Microsoft actually was the first out with tablets, touch tablets. Microsoft actually was the first out with a smartwatch. And here they are trying to reinvent a technology they released a decade ago, which is now led by Apple. Go figure.
I don't like push notifications either, so maybe that's the problem, because that's what it's good for. Is like I can see the push notifications without having to pull the phone out of my pocket. Another trendy thing that everybody's still talking about is Bitcoin. A couple of stories over the weekend that were interesting. Tell us about them, Sarah.
Yeah, I think I should take this opportunity to admit that my understanding of Bitcoin was pretty flimsy last week, even though I was pretty sure I understood how it worked. It's really somewhat fascinating, and many of you are probably, even more read up on it than I am. But the idea is that Bitcoin mining is, this is a computational process that is actually sucking out a lot of power, electrical power, because you've got all these GPUs that are running in the background. You've got actual people who have to mine for Bitcoins, and if you're not familiar with just the term of mining, it's kind of like virtual gold mining. You're trying to basically find a sequence of data, they call it a block, that produces a specific pattern when the Bitcoin algorithm, the hash, is applied to that data. If you get a match, then me as a miner, I get a bounty of Bitcoins. But the likelihood that I will get those Bitcoins gets harder the more Bitcoins are mined, because we've got a finite number of Bitcoins out there. Search gets more difficult in computers. And then over time, it reduces the rate at which Bitcoins are produced. And then at some point, there won't be any new Bitcoins to be produced, and people will just basically be trading them back and forth. So the idea is that to run computers to find these Bitcoins is increasingly taking a lot of power. Blockchain.info is a company that tracks Bitcoin-related data, estimates that miners are using 1,005.59 megawatt hours of electrical consumption each day in pursuit of new Bitcoins, which is costing about $150,000 in power costs each day. However, if you can generate $470,000 in Bitcoin-related revenue each day, it becomes worth it. Robert, is this an environmental meltdown?
Absolutely. In the enterprise, we're always taking a look at how much power certain processes take. And this is one of these things that's going to get worse and worse and worse. As you mentioned, right now, the blocks are relatively easy to unlock. Even a high-end PC with, say, quad GPUs in it can unlock a block or two a week. And that will actually make you money. But as we unlock more and more of those blocks, it gets harder and harder to unlock them, which means you're going to be spending more and more CPU cycles. I believe the number was, as you mentioned, 1,005,059 megawatt hours, or I'm going to call it 1.21 gigawatts. It takes 1.21 gigawatts a day to do all this Bitcoin mining, and slowly that's going to unlock fewer and fewer Bitcoins. It eventually will reach parity, and then it will reach a point at which it's more expensive to mine them than you recover in the Bitcoin currency. And as we all know, Bitcoin currency is fluctuating in price madly. So you never really know from day to day whether or not you're going to break even on your hashing algorithm.
Well, and then you also get you sort of come up against a situation, and there have been people, writing articles online who say, yeah, I had my computer running for a few days, and the power was actually greater than what I ended up getting out of it, Bitcoin-wise. Tom, is this going to turn into something where if you've got more money to put together a more dedicated mining rig, you're the one who's going to end up with the most Bitcoins, and it's pretty unfair for the little guy?
No, because of what Father Robert said about the fact that there's a limited number and it gets harder to mine them as time goes on. It's not like somebody can corner the market. Bitcoin's very well designed, and everybody always reminds me in the chat room that back in February 2011, Steve Gibson did a great episode explaining how Bitcoin works that I happened to be the co-host filling in for Leo on that episode. It's a great place if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty of it. But it's such an interesting system where, because it's mined, there's a continual supply for a short period of time, but there's a limited number overall. And so it is a rare resource. It's a verifiable resource. And economists are kind of all over the map about whether they think this can actually catch on and replace what's called fiat currency. That's the kind of currency we usually get from governments, where they just kind of issue it by fiat and say, this is now your currency, like a dollar bill. And there's also lots of other people getting into the game and saying, you know what, I think we can improve on the weaknesses that people have identified in Bitcoin.
Yeah,
and so maybe eventually some other company will do it.
Well, you've got a couple different cryptocurrencies. Litecoin is one. Litecoin, the designer of Litecoin, says the problem with Bitcoin is that the transaction takes a long time. Can take, on average, I think it's like a 10-minute type of a thing. And Litecoin is designed to basically push through transactions in, a third of the time. There's something called PP Coin that's designed to use a lot less power. So it's an environmentally more friendly version of Bitcoin, at least according to the company. So yeah, it's sort of the beginning of, I don't know what it's going to be. And like you mentioned, Tom, there's economists who say, a lot of this is in part because, well, the state of monetary situations for many countries right now are just not that great. So it's sort of pushing us into, well, what's the next thing? What's going to be better than what we're using now?
I do want to add one thing, and that is a sort of a crossover to the enterprise world. Right now, if you had some programming expertise, the thing to do would be to rent out, say, NVIDIA's grid cluster, which gives you supercomputing at a crazy low price, and you're not paying for the power, and just mine as many Bitcoins as you possibly can, because that thing could crack Bitcoins on a minute per minute basis. And then when it reaches that point at which there's parity, you stop and you let the amateurs have at it.
Yeah, no, it's actually, I'm surprised somebody hasn't tried that already. Maybe NVIDIA's trying it. Who knows? Let's talk a little bit about that European deal we mentioned in the news fuse. A few more details on this. What Google has agreed to, and only in Europe, so only on European search engines would this happen, is to label Google products clearly anytime a Google product comes in a search result where they don't sell ads. So things like their weather section or the Google News section, they would just have to label it. If it's a situation where they sell ads, let's say you're looking for business reviews, restaurant reviews, something like that, they would have to show links to at least 3 competitors alongside any of Google's own products. So anytime, say, a Google travel link shows up in a search result, there'd have to be 3, Expedia would have to be there, TripAdvisor would have to be there as well. In paid results, which Google Shopping is all pay for play. You don't show up in the Google Shopping unless you pay to be there. The links would also have to be auctioned to rivals. So while you're in Google Shopping and you're looking for things like Amazon, retail outlets, rival shopping search engines would have to be allowed to buy those links as well. Now, there's also a couple things like the ability to block results from vertical search without blocking them from main search. So if Google has a travel portal for search, TripAdvisor may say, I want to block you from indexing me and using me over there, but I do want to still show up in the regular Google search. You can also block up to 10% of the content of your site. Yelp, for instance, complained that they were taking the hours of operation from Yelp's reviews and using them in Google search results. They wanted to be able to stop that. What they'll do is they'll market test this for a month, give the industry a chance to weigh in, and then when it goes ahead, it'll last for 5 years, be enforced by a third party, and Google, if they're found in violation, could be fined up to 10% of their global annual sales as a result. So what do you guys think? Useless? Like, does it just not do anything, or is it a fair, equitable remedy, or is it not enough? Should they be making Google do more? What do you think, Father Robert?
This is one of those things that's going to be almost impossible to enforce. I mean, there will be complaints. No matter how proactive Google gets, one of their competitors is going to complain that, oh, well, they're being unfair in their search ranking, or they're not including us in enough of their searches. So this is really one of those no-teeth legislation until someone complains, and then Google will drag it out through the courts for the next decade. So how do you legislate fairness? This has been the prime question with every Google case dealing with their search. Once Google has become the equivalent of a private superhighway, what is fair for them to promote of their own services? And then how much do you allow them to become sort of a common carrier for advertising for their competitors? This is one of those things that no amount of legislation is going to answer. It really has to come from companies actually making competing products and driving Google to have a competitive reason to have fairness in their own internet searches. I just don't see it yet.
And that's actually one of the issues, is that in Europe, Google dominates search even more so than it does in the U.S. The U.S. closed their investigation in January and required just a couple of minor ad-related tweaks, similar things that also happened in this situation. But is it because Google dominates Europe too much? Maybe. What do you think of this, Sarah?
Well, some of this, I'm a little hung up on the Google Shopping part of it. So if you're a company, you got to pay to show up in Google Shopping results. What does that mean for a rival who doesn't pay? Then you also get to show up in Google Shopping results? Because
no, the links will be auctioned to rivals.
Okay.
That means that Google can't, if I'm reading this right, and I'm not 100% certain I am, but if I'm reading this right, it means Google can't shut out, say, I can't think of a good shopping engine out there, but let's say reseller ratings, or shopper.com from CNET, maybe a better example. They can't say, well, we're not going to sell to you because you're another search engine. They have to auction links off to those guys.
Oh, I see. So we're in a situation right now where Google can be selective and say, you'd like to pay, but we're not actually going to put you in our results.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean,
so that's
most businesses could.
Right. I don't know. I mean, I think that I agree that enforcing this is going to be really tricky, and they're going to basically give it a test, see if it works, try to identify where maybe the system is breaking down. But in general, it seems like it's a good move for fairness overall.
I guess I kind of tend towards the useless side. Like, I know that, okay, now there's going to be 3 other results alongside Google products. And maybe it's a good thing for Google to make Google call out, like, this is our product. But I feel like they kind of did that already. And there is competition. Just maybe it needs this to make it work better in Europe. I don't know.
It's like a weird, search result affirmative action type of thing going on, Like, you could have a real debate about, the good and bad of both.
Let's take a break and thank our other sponsor for today's show, Interop, now in its 28th year. Interop Las Vegas, the largest independent conference and expo for IT professionals. This year, the agenda, the speakers, the size of the expedition, and the trending enterprise IT topics that this event is going to cover are all pointing to this one thing. You cannot miss this year's event. They got 6 important reasons. A, it's vendor neutral. So they don't favor one vendor over another. You can easily compare solutions. The breadth of content is amazing. Over 125 conference sessions, workshops on topics that you need to learn about: big data, cloud computing, bring your own devices, information security. You get hands-on access to 300 plus solution providers. You can see interoperability in action. One of the highlights of Interop is InteropNet, a real-life network of the newest gear and solutions. Training specifically for Apple in the enterprise. If you got people banging down your door saying, I want to use Apple stuff, you can take advantage of the Mac and iOS IT conference. And the Information Week CIO Summit. For the first time at Interop, Information Week will produce the Information Week CIO Summit, a great opportunity for CIOs and IT executive leadership to learn how to drive, fund, measure, and profit from a culture of innovation. But you don't have to take my word for it. Father Robert, you basically met your entire Twiat cast at Interop. Isn't that right?
That's right. Twiat comes from Interop because Interop is all about putting a bunch of geeks into a room and then letting them solve problems. Now, if you are into consumer electronics, you go to CES. If you're into interactive, you go to South by Southwest. If you are in the enterprise, if you're an enterprise geek, you have to go to Interop.
If you're not convinced yet, go check it out. Interop.com, www.interop.com. How could you not? Register and use this code, WELV. That'll get you $200 off a conference pass or a free expo pass. And you get to go to Las Vegas. Go to www.interop.com. Use that offer code WELV. And we thank Interop for their support of Tech News Today. All righty. Let's move on to Mozilla's latest experiment. They want to add collaboration to everything.
Yeah, you could think of it almost as Google Drive capabilities to pretty much any website, and the service is called Tow Truck, and it works.
What?
But yeah, actually, if you let's say that we all want to collaborate on Twit's homepage, right? Tom and Jason and Robert and I, we're all going to kind of figure out what we want to change. We want to change some text or some colors or whatever. What I can do is add a little snippet of JavaScript code to the site, which allows, well, it's JavaScript code, and then there's another little bit of code that will allow a tow truck, basically a big button, to appear on the site. And at that point, when I sort of say, okay, engage tow truck, I get a little URL that I can share with all of you gentlemen. We all sort of hop on and we can collaborate in real time. So you can, author together. You've got messaging capabilities. You've even got voice chatting capabilities using the internal microphones on your machines. The chatting works via WebRTC for the text. And it's kind of neat. I mean, the idea is that, you're not all necessarily in the same place, but you're all working on the same project. What I want to know is, this is actually something that Medium, which is the blogging platform that's started by the Obvious Corp guys, who are the founders of Twitter. They had announced last week some collaboration tools for Medium, but that's using, the Medium engine. This tow truck functionality would work potentially on pretty much any site, that you had control over adding code for. Now, Mozilla says this is open source project and it's totally alpha quality. Please use with caution. Father Robert, is there a situation where you feel like you would use this at least regularly?
Yeah, this is absolutely not for the average user. The average user is not going to even know what to do with any of these code snippets. I think for intermediate people, it would be incredibly helpful because this will give them examples of what they could actually do with their code and the functionality they can add to their sites. For the advanced programmer, this could just become a repository for best practices code. I'm kind of excited by that. What I'd like to see is more companies try to do this because it encourages young programmers, potential programmers, to get into the game. And as we've seen from the recent news, we just don't have enough of those. In fact, I think that's why Twit might be adding a programming show at some time in the near future.
You're psychic. That's amazing. I looked at this and I played around with some of the examples. And one way, I mean, Father Robert, you're right. This is not meant to be implemented by the average user, but it could really benefit the average user if it's implemented in certain ways. One of the examples they show is filling out a form. Now, at first you may be like, why do I need to collaborate on a form? But have you ever been filling out a form that's really long and involved and you needed like, what's my wife's social security number? Or what was our address back in Cleveland? You could actually use this to collaborate and like link in someone and say, hey, can you help me fill out this form? And then both of you work on the form and it automatically syncs into the form fill out. So I think we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg of what people could do with this if they can add easy WebRTC type collaboration, including voice and video eventually. I'm interested to see what people come up with.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's basically like, hey, let's look at this page right now, wherever you are. You don't have to be next to me. We can talk. We can chat. You could just enter the social security number into this, halfway down the form if you want. And it's really easy to implement. I mean, you add a little JavaScript code and you're off and running.
Do a little dance. Do a little collaboration.
And get down tonight.
Get forms filled out.
Get forms filled out.
All right, Nintendo shutting down. All right.
There's part of that song I'm not singing for everyone's benefit.
For the video viewers, I had to allow you to continue to dance until we were done. But Nintendo shutting down Wii channels around the world. June 28th, they'll pull the plug on 5 channels in the U.S., Australia, and other countries. That's the Forecast channel, their weather channel, the News channel, the Everybody Votes channel, which was everybody voting on things, the Nintendo channel, and the Check Me Out channel, where you could look at other me's. Now, you may argue some of these are ridiculous, but the News of the Weather channel, those are somewhat useful. In Japan, they'll be getting rid of the News channel, the Weather channel, the Digicam Print channel, Everyone's Nintendo channel, the Everyone Votes channel, and the Me Contest channel. And Wii users will lose the ability to exchange data with their Wii friends via the Wii Connect 24. Now, interestingly, the Wii Shop channel will not go away from any of these platforms because they still want to take your money. But Nintendo told CNET, 1, low participation rate on these channels over their 6-year lifetime was a factor, and 2, they're moving resources to Wii U. Now, you can still buy a Wii, a good old-fashioned Nintendo Wii, but you're not going to get all of the channels. If fewer people want to buy a Wii U than maybe Nintendo hoped, is this a bad move, Father Robert?
Not really. You could see this as, yes, they're refocusing their efforts on things that are actually going to be making money for them. They're going to be bringing them a return on their investment. But the other thing you have to be concerned about is the low participation. And that was just sort of shuffled in there under the wire. But what we're seeing is there's just not that much engagement with Wii users, Wii or Wii U. They don't have the online collaboration. They don't have the online enticement to bring you in and hold you in with content. People will log in, they'll play a game or two, and then they'll go away, and then they'll put their Wii in the corner and not play with it for the next month. So what we have to be worried about here is not that Nintendo is refocusing its efforts. It's that people really don't care what Nintendo's efforts are. The one thing that they're keeping is a shopping channel because it arguably does make some money back. But the things that should be attracting people, the weather channel, the news channel, things that people will check on a daily basis, they're not doing it on the Wii. And that's not going to change no matter how much money Nintendo invests in other premium content.
What do you think, Sarah? Is this a big deal, or is this just, it's late in the life cycle? If you buy one, you can still play the games on it, so it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I mean, this is not enough people are interested, so they're not going to put resources towards something called the Check Me Out channel.
Okay, yeah, you're right about that one for sure.
Like what? I don't know. In general, I tend to think like, ooh, when content goes away, that's sad. Being in the content creation business, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, raise your hand if you're like, darn, I was about to buy a Wii and I really was going to buy it for the news channel and the Digicam Print channel. Now I'm not going to. I don't think this is going to be the end of the world for that many people.
I want to call out Mawface in the chat room who says, Nintendo just needs time to Wii-vamp.
Yeah, thank you. And now we have a title. All right. Finishing up with those Chinese fake parts that they were using to make real iPhones. This is confusing. How does this work, Sarah?
Yeah, so if I piqued your interest in the news fuse, here's kind of exactly what happened. Okay. So in December, an Apple shop owner based in Wenzhou, China, turned 121 iPhone 4S banned parts. So it's like the core of the phone, and it's worth about $476 a pop. So it's an expensive part. Turned them into Apple, said they're broken, we need replacements. Apple replaced them. But in January, Apple's looking at all these parts that are supposedly malfunctioning, and it turns out that they're counterfeit parts. It's not actually made by Apple at all. They reported this to the shop. The shop says, oh, we didn't know. This is not something that started with us. They reported the case to the police. On April 1st, the police arrested one of the shop's engineers and her boyfriend. Apparently, they were sort of the ringleaders. They were pointing their fingers at other folks. There have been a group of people arrested since then. So the question is sort of like, well, all right, it took Apple somewhat of a long time to realize that there were counterfeit parts that potentially would work because people were trying to get money out of Apple. But how many iPhones may be floating around with at least partly counterfeit parts, but still working pretty well? I don't know, Robert.
Well, something that's not being said in the story, and I really want to find out, is are these really counterfeit phones, or are they gray market? You know, did they come off the same assembly line after hours? Did they come off the same assembly line?
As I understand it, the counterfeit parts are the ones they were sending to Apple.
Yes.
And then they would get real parts in exchange. So if you bought one of these iPhones, it would have real parts. It was just a way for them to get cheap replacement parts for broken iPhones that were outside the return period for parts.
I mean, don't they all know that the parts are actually made in China? They didn't have to go very far. Come on.
Yeah, but they get them for free.
Oh, okay. That's
right?
different.
So you fake the serial number on them of a perfectly well-working iPhone that's within the parts replacement period. You send the fake part back with that serial number embossed on it, and then they send you a real part, and then you put that in another iPhone that's too old to get its replacement part. So you got the original iPhone that's still working fine, and you got the old one you couldn't have replaced. Now you got two iPhones.
And you're not supposed to do that.
See, we don't do that here. We have Costco. Costco does the same thing. Thank you very much. No, but seriously, I mean, looking at this, it does beg the question.
They were making counterfeit band parts, 4S band parts, and embossing serial numbers on them and sending them to Apple. And I guess Apple just didn't think anyone would ever do that, so they don't check each one of those parts necessarily.
I mean, this is the first report I've heard of something like this happening. So, this is, it might just be a case of Apple saying, all right, well, now people do this. We got to take a closer look when we get, over 100 parts that are supposedly, there's something wrong with them before we send a bunch of parts that are actually pretty expensive. I mean, $400, almost $500 each. I mean, these are parts that Apple doesn't want to give out unless they really have to.
But I mean, this is an old scam. This is the old return scam. You buy something from a store and you return an older part.
Well, sure. I mean, for iPhone specifically.
Right, specifically for iPhone. But you're right, Tom. It does sort of beg the question of how this went on for so long. iPhones are not a handkerchief. They're not a wallet that you bring back to Nordstrom's. They should be identifiable. They should be readily identifiable via the part number. So with so many with the same 4 digits of their serial number, you figured someone would have figured it out a little bit earlier. The fact that they didn't just might point to the fact that there's just so many iPhones. No one has time.
Well, I wish someone would counterfeit me a part for this topic of our randomizer. Businessman in Hong Kong has spent $15 million on his iPhone 5 because it's diamond encrusted. Vertu is a company that makes expensive mobile phones that use precious metals like gold and platinum, as well as diamonds and other gemstones to customize expensive mobile phones. And British designer Stuart Hughes made one for a businessman who goes by the name Joe. It's an iPhone 5 with a giant 26-karat black diamond.
Dumb.
And the diamond had apparently been in his family, in Joe's family, for generations.
Why couldn't he just wait for the iWatch? At least then he could, be like actually wearing the bling. I mean,
or the
what do you do? Yeah, or a ring. What do you do with this iPhone? Like, you make sure that it's always, attached to your lapel. What are you gonna do? Throw that in your pocket? No.
I saw one of these types of products at CES. It was a diamond encrusted iPhone cover. That kind of made more sense because you could move it from iPhone to iPhone. But I mean, the old idea of an item of conspicuous consumption just doesn't really make that much sense anymore. If the real status symbol is the phone itself, not what you put around it.
He used this 26-karat black diamond that's been in his family for generations as the home button.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what you do.
That almost seems sacrilegious.
Yeah.
Now, I think this is absolutely ridiculous unless they'd like to send a review unit to the brick house, at which case I think we should take a closer look.
It's not going to work any differently, though. It's just fancier.
It would be
It's
great
just
for
an
i5.
iPhone.
It would be great for i5.
It would be great for i5, yes. If you'd like to donate, no. Just
So, Joe, if you're
don't
visiting
send me
Petaluma,
jewels.
A lot of glare, though, for those close-ups, so you got to be careful with that. That is a black diamond. Maybe that sounds
Worth
good.
it.
This episode of Tech News Today brought to you by Shutterstock.com. At Shutterstock.com, you'll find the perfect image or video for your next creative project, whether it's for your website, a publication, an advertisement, a video, any other type of project. You can choose from over 20 million high-quality stock photos, illustrations, vectors, and video clips. Shutterstock sources images from around the world and puts them at your fingertips. Many contributors to Shutterstock are pro photographers and artists. And here's the key. Shutterstock reviews each image individually. It's like artisan clip art. They look for content. They look for quality before they add it to the library. Shutterstock adds 10,000 images every day. So every time you visit, you're going to find something new. And you can choose individual image packs or a monthly subscription for the best deal. You can download up to 25 images a day with a standard subscription. And that is any image, any size. You pay only the one price, and then you can use it legally in most of the projects you have. I use it for, it's a thing. I'm always looking for a good image to go along with the stuff we're talking about on that podcast. And Shutterstock blows me away with the stuff that they have in there. I just looked for a drink, a shrub drink. I found this beautiful orange cocktail. It just really pretties up the place. Sophisticated search tools mean it's easy to find stuff. The new Spectrum tool allows you to actually sort by color spectrum. If you're like, you know what, I have a very strict color palette, this is going to help you out a lot. And it's a completely global offering. They have offices located in more than a dozen countries: Germany, China, Italy, Brazil, Belgium, a truly global marketplace. You can try Shutterstock today by signing up for a free account. You don't need a credit card. I love that. Just start an account, begin using Shutterstock to help imagine what your next project could be like, and save assets you find to your new light box. Once you decide to purchase, use offer code TNT4, and new accounts will receive 30% off any package. I did not say that wrong. That's Shutterstock.com for 30% off new accounts. Use offer code TNT4. We thank Shutterstock for their support of Tech News Today. Let us see what is on the calendar on a Monday.
EA is closing down SimCity Social, The Sims Social, and Pet Society on June 14th. Who's sad about that? Somebody is. Yeah. Tomorrow, both Intel and Yahoo have their earnings reports. And also tomorrow and running through Wednesday the 17th is Ad Age Digital Conference in New York City.
New York City?
That's right.
Get an advertising executive. Let's see what's incoming.
Incoming message.
Got an email from Brian, who's pointed out, Tom, you mentioned in episode 730, it was hard to find a place that takes Bitcoins. I didn't say it was impossible. We've had lots of people write in with examples of places you can find Bitcoins, but I like Brian's the best. On Thursday, Yahoo Finance mentioned a bar in New York City that takes Bitcoins. Great timing. The New York City bar lets you pay for your tab with your Bitcoins. So looking for a drink in New York City? Got a pile of Bitcoins you've been mining? Hop on into the bar. We'll have the link in the show notes. That is it for this episode of Tech News Today. Father Robert, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me back. It's always great to be on the TNT set.
Well, absolutely. Let folks know where they can find your work at This Week in Enterprise Tech as well as elsewhere.
Oddly enough, you can find me every Monday at noon. That's Pacific time. We geek out, typically with Brian Chi and Curtis Franklin, about the greatest news and coming trends in enterprise technology. It's This Week in Enterprise Tech. You got to see it.
We used to think there was not a way to make enterprise fun until these guys started doing this show. You got to check it out.
It involves a lot of liquor.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Check it out at twit.tv/Twiet, T-W-I-E-T. And of course, you can vote on the stories we include in the show every day at technewstoday.reddit.com. That's our subreddit. Lets folks have a voice, have a say in what we cover. We look at that every day when we pick our stories. You can find us on the web, twit.tv/TNT. You can email us, TNT@twit.tv, or give us a call. Leave us a voicemail. Our phone number is 260-TNT-SHOW. Happy to have Lloyd Case with us tomorrow. We'll see you then.